Yeah, just a question about the elephant and castle. So if I was the Minister for Communities and Local Government, I've just magically become Eric Pickles. You know, what would you say about changing the planning infrastructure that we have in this country? Is it a help or a hindrance? What messages should we as a group give to government about how do we make stuff like that happen better, faster, more accurately, you know, on time, on budget, etc., etc.?
Yes, please.
Yeah, shall I have a go?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, in terms of the elephant, I think the localism issues, the idea of talking to people, has been not superficial. It's out there, but we did it anyway. I mean, we were always of the mind, and the developer was of the mind, that communication between us and them, as it's perceived, should be a sort of broken down those barriers, and it's always us. And what's worked there, be it due to government pushing or not, is the fact that the project is owned by the people that live there now, not just those that will come in, but those that live there now. Because it's always easy to design for those that are coming, because you don't know who they are. So informing those that are currently there, even though they're not necessarily going to buy into what you're building, is important. So whether government is dealing with that or not, I'm not altogether sure.
Yep.
I was fascinated by the elephant and castle. I'm the director of one of the development companies who 7 years ago was bidding into yet another round of bidding. John's point, it's taken 15 years so far. We're talking about 2024. I mean, they are unbelievable timescales. And if you look at the scale of the elephant and castle, it matches pretty well the scale of the Olympic Village. And the layout in some respects, the central areas, the green areas and so on, quite similar in concept. And that's been done in basically 5 years. And fundamentally because of planning. And because of that ability to actually just get on with it. Now, against that is clearly the lack of any widespread communication. But you have to ask the question, do we just talk ourselves to death in this country? We over-consult, we over-communicate to the point where we finish up not doing anything. I mean, I actually can remember in the late 60s, early 70s, when I worked for Lang, we had those blocks on the front of our magazine, you know, proudly, we've built the longest block in Europe. But anyway, and you might argue that all that happened rather too quickly in the 60s, the industrialized building concept and the speed with which that went ahead, without taking on board perhaps the social impact of what we were creating. But there has to be somewhere between 5 years and 30 years, because otherwise, you know, whole generations are being denied the opportunity to live in areas which they're proud to live in.
So maybe our planning regime is not one with high export potential then, in terms of how we do. And I just wondered if there are people here who could, because where is that balance? Those of us who have worked in parts of Asia, in China or in Hong Kong, actually value the efficiency with which the infrastructure is both conceived, designed, and then gets into execution. Actually, maybe people would be surprised, actually public utilities in the United States is very slow. The whole process of getting approvals for that, you know, in the country of fast track, it always surprises me in the United States how long things do take, the sort of things that we're looking at. You were talking about India. India has got a planning regime which actually is very, very slow. I know it varies by states, and there are some more dynamic than others. But where's the balance in that? I just wondered if people here have got some comments on that, and where that should be.
Terry, just a quick comment. I'm afraid the grim reality of this, in my view, is that benign dictatorships occasionally get things done. And listening to the conversation earlier today about the airports, you know, it's very interesting that there is a great opportunity to build an airport in the Thames. I was talking to someone a little while ago, and they said that will take 25 years. in Hong Kong with British contractors, British engineers. It was done in under 10 years under a British administration. But there was a level of this is what's going to happen in the interests of all, and we've listened enough, and that's the end of it. And I do think that the time has come when we have to have a little bit less democracy and a little more drive for the common good in the longer haul for the generations who will follow us. Otherwise, we will have seriously let them down.
Can I just add? Yeah, democracy is important, but what I think is crippling it is the fact that we're not making it a shorter programme, and we're actually always trying to talk to too many people on too many levels. Whereas if you can somehow manage it in such a way that you can cut across all that, and actually, as John said, for the national good, and make that the point, then you just have to make the decision. And I agree with what was said earlier, mayors in cities are critical. And
in the Elephant and Gate, did you have any issues to relocate people? Have any been relocated? Have they been incentivized to relocate?
Well, as I said earlier on this morning, the only people living on the park were, how many, Georgia, in the 3 traveller communities? Yeah, so there were 100 people in 3 traveller communities, and so we built new parks, basically, within about a mile of where they're currently living. That required, delicate handling and quite a lot of discussion with them. But in a sense, it was, I'm sorry, we are going to move you. And now let's sit down and agree what's the best way to move you, how best can we create something that you will want to live in and create a community for you a mile away from the one where you're living presently.
yeah, can I just say at the Elephant we had a similar decanting process where obviously at the Heygate it was slowly declining, but we had over 800 people living there, which gradually were decanted into what we call the early housing scheme. So we set up a framework of some 15 architects who then designed on 20 sites new homes for these people to move into. And we did ask them beforehand, and there was a 83% agreement to doing that. So it was, a democratic process, if you will, but they knew that this was going to happen. Now, there are other underlying tones about the politics of how perhaps the estate became run down in the first place. Lack of funding. Perhaps it was a place that certain people were decanted in that they shouldn't have been in the first place, which set it on a certain trajectory. But after that, okay, there was a democratic process. People have now moved away. But those that moved away have still got the right, if they had chosen to do so at the time, to come back. So when it's done, if they want to come back, they're welcome.
But it's in the city going on as well as spreading. So I think, John, you want to...
Yes, I was going to talk about value and identity. The Elephant's in the middle of London. People sort of know it's there, but people are blind to it. They don't see the value of it, which is remarkable. It's been sat there derelict, or semi-derelict, or in need of regeneration for 20 years. And it's taken all that time before someone says, actually, this has a value. Now, the local authority have been working very hard under 2 administrations now. It started with the Labour administration, went into a Liberal Democrat and Conservative coalition, and now back to Labour, all of which have been talking about it. But now that it's actually structured into a position where it's going to happen, because the economics of it are still not great, but the vision is there. People have seen that it should happen and see what a wonderful opportunity it is. So the value is in raising its profile and giving it a setting within London that demonstrates to people it has a value.